What's going on, you guys? Theo here with the big review, back yet again with another King of Fighters All-Star video, and today we are going to be doing the second installment in our series of guild raid guides, this time taking a look at the expert difficulty. If you didn't see hard mode, check that one out, it'll be in the description below. But before we get into all that, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. It helps me out a ton as a new YouTuber. So let's go ahead and jump into it. We're going to start out with more of, if you guys want to call it a whale team, go right ahead, but this is the team that I always use. You guys will have seen plenty of runs that I've done in the past using this team. I've done upwards of 450 million damage in a single run with this team. And really what this guide is going to be aimed to doing is teaching you guys how to maximize on your keys, meaning you want to ideally try to get to the final box that you will need, which you're going to need to average about 204 million damage total between two runs in order to get the maximum box that you can get for expert difficulty. Otherwise, if you really have a well-built team like this one, you'll be able to do it on one key most times, and you'll be able to do that fairly easily. So as you'll see here, we're using Orochi Iori on the leadoff spot, along with Boss Syndrome, Omega Rugal, and Delins for our darkness. Now, as a rule of thumb, you generally are going to need a darkness character in order to get the maximum amount you can out of these runs for your key investment. So Delins, being the best darkness wielder in the game, by default is the best one to use. And really what you're going for here is this tier 7 box is really what you're wanting. And like I said, you're going to need to do at least at minimum on two keys 204 million damage per run in order to get that done. So really, you shouldn't have too much trouble if you have these characters here. We're using the Lady Geese on the striker for my Iori. Obviously, that is a situation that I've gone over in detail, such as this past week when I did a breakdown of the new Iori cards. We talked about how my Iori at max investment is able to deal about 50 to 55% shield shred against expert mode Omega Rugal, using a full rotation of all three of his skills and his new 3PG finisher. And then we have just overall the best possible striker for the Boss Syndrome Omega Rugal with the Boss Syndrome Orochi. And then we also have for the striker on my Delins being the Nameless. Now, you can pretty much pick whatever you want for your strikers, really, at the end of the day. That's up to you. I personally prefer these. I find these to be the best options overall for this team, but your mileage may vary. Some people prefer other things, and there's really no right or wrong answer here for a lot of this, although I would say you definitely want to have the darkness dealer on the striker for the Iori because of this card. Being that this card, as we've established in the past, does not apply darkness, it just deals darkness damage. You'll want someone to apply darkness in order to get the full effect of your Iori on your leadoff spot, which really he's in a flex position. You'll just kind of switch him out in and in whenever you have these other guys on cooldown. You'll want to, again, use his 3PG finisher, in my opinion. Some people may prefer the original 5PG because it has a longer animation, but being that you can't necessarily reliably use that shield up and shield down the way you can with the 3PG because it is a grab, I would prefer to be using this one overall. And then when we talk about the striker situation, like I said, we are going to talk about other striker options that are really good, but for Delins, I prefer Nameless. However, if you have the rest of the 7 Knights characters, you can always go and use one of those over him. But I prefer to have this one just because it decreases his damage received and increases his power, as well as his attack by a very generous 10%. And I like to get as much damage out of Delins as humanly possible. I do have the option, if I wanted to use, for instance, one of the power gauge stones with darkness, and I prefer to just use the generic 7 Knights stone on him just for the extra added damage that he's able to output. Overall, I find that to be more beneficial in the long run for the way I play this, but that's pretty much going to be this team in a nutshell. This is a very, very strong team. Now, is it ideal for some people? Maybe, maybe not. For me, on the other hand, being that I do everything straight up from a mobile phone and don't have a controller or an emulator or a PC or anything like that that I use, I prefer to use this team overall. and this is a very popular setup for a lot of people in general, so I'm by no means the original person to put this team together and use this team, but I have been able to pilot it to very nice success overall. So if you have these characters and can build it, I do recommend it. So let's go ahead and move on to a more budget-friendly team overall, and that is going to be this comp here. This comp is going to be Orochi, Iori, Lady Geese, and Gonitz as your primary characters. And you're going to see here, it's basically substituting the Lady Geese and the Gonitz in for the two more kind of premium characters with the Delans and the Boss Syndrome character, but overall what you'll do is you'll kind of do the same thing just with these characters. Gonitz is extremely good for shield shred in general, especially if you can have darkness applied onto the boss. So for instance, say you have Lady Geese in, you apply darkness, swap to Gonitz real quick, and use him to just cycle through his skills and hit his finisher real quick. He's wonderful for that. Now, one of the big important things here is going to be Halloween Gatecrasher Chris on Striker for the Iori, just replacing the Lady Geese from the previous team, as she will be on the main lineup for this one. So very beneficial to have that application of darkness on a Striker. You need that, and you can't get it out of Psyche. Now, speaking of Psyche, I do not recommend him whatsoever. His PvE damage is just so lackluster that it is just not worth using him for this. A lot of people I know might like him. Mine is built up quite a bit, and I have never gotten any success out of him in this, just based solely upon the fact that he's just not a good damage dealer overall. So I prefer not to use him. Lady Geese, on the other hand, is a phenomenal pick. Now, is she perfect? No, she does have a grab finisher, so you'll need to use her finisher primarily when the shield is going to be down. Otherwise, she is not going to be able to use it. But as you'll see here, for instance, I have my Psyche at Awakening level 40, and even with full caps and things like that, he's still just not able to do anything above what Lady Geese is. So she is your best alternative to Delans if you do not have a Delans, and I highly recommend picking her up for this if you want to take this seriously and get through it on minimal keys. Again, if you want to do this on 4 keys total, that's way easier and changes the subject here. But really what we're trying to do here is do it on 2. Now, this is a great striker here. Active team members obtain 10% power and increase their ultimate move damage by a good 6% for 10 seconds on this Billy Khan. Billy Khan is really, really good. I highly recommend using him for this. A lot of people don't even realize how good his striker ability is, and in essence, it is going to mean that it is going to increase your overall damage over time and let you fire off finishers just that much more, which, as opposed to the first team I showed you, which is going to be a very nuke-heavy team that can get by on minimal clock stoppage and be able to fire off rotations of great awakening skills over time. When the shield is down, this team more so just wants to stop the clock as much as humanly possible, so very beneficial to have him. And then we've already talked about Okita in the previous video. I'm using him here on this Gonitz, and this is the team budget-friendly wise that I've seen most people have the most success with. That's why I'm picking this as the primary budget team. But this is going to increase active team members' critical rate by 10% for 10 seconds. Again, very beneficial to you whenever you are talking about trying to deal as much damage to the shield as humanly possible. However, I do realize that Okita is going to be a collab character, so if you need a nice alternative to him that's full on budget, go with Mr. Karate. In my opinion, he is a phenomenal striker for this. Kind of similar vein, the reasons why you'd use him, but that is a good alternative for this team that is going to be a character that's still available and technically free to play. So overall, that is going to be the best budget-friendly team. Now, obviously, if you need to interchange things here and there based on maybe you don't have Lady Geese, for example, which is really the biggest issue if you don't have her, then you're going to have to fall back on Chris. At that point, I would fall back on him over a Psyche. I don't believe that he is a great alternative, in my opinion, for this, but some people have used him to varying degrees of success. It basically just comes down to how many keys are you wanting to invest, how much time are you wanting to invest in order to get the maximum amount out of this daily. It is a grind to do this every day, because oftentimes, especially with a non-collab or boss syndrome team, it can be kind of tough to get to the numbers you're wanting to hit sometimes. In 1 or 2 runs, you'll have to kind of just stop and quit out and go back in and redo it over and over and over again, which gets frustrating after a while. But overall, in my opinion, this is the best possible budget team that you can put together. Now, some people might prefer different strikers here and there, what have you. Like I said, I've given you a few alternatives here and there, but really these are the ones that I recommend on a personal level. And again, I don't base all of this on my own findings. A lot of times with stuff like this, I also base it on how other players are doing that are top-level performers in Guild Raid, what teams they're using, what comps they're using, what they prefer to use, what their success rates are. And I could give you 7 or 8 different teams in this video and spend 45 minutes doing it, but this is all about, again, making sure that you get as much mileage out of one key as humanly possible. And with that in mind, this is going to be, as far as a budget comp goes, the best plausible option for that. Now, other things you can do with this team, again, if you need to use Chris as your primary darkness dealer, you can do that, at which point that is going to change kind of what you're doing with Iori. It kind of gets messy at that point and gets kind of unideal and further from ideal the more you get into it. You can use, I've seen some people use characters like Nameless before, and so on and so forth in these types of comps. And again, you can do that, but you're not going to do near as much damage as you typically would with this comp. Because again, you need a good darkness dealer. If people ever wonder why people value darkness dealers so much, it's because of these types of situations. Because there are so few good darkness dealers out there that whenever one drops, it's a big deal, because there are specific instances such as this, or even with some of the Immortal stuff, where you need darkness as a dot. So let's move on. We'll talk about the last team I want to talk about here, which is going to be kind of the, if you're using an emulator PC controller, so on and so forth, macros, this is the team you play. And this is going to be, in my opinion, the penultimate team for kind of the whales or veterans or whatever you want to call it. But if you are using a controller or an emulator, macros, all that type of stuff, this team is going to do obscene damage. I've seen people do 900 million damage runs with this team before. Really, it just comes down to Eileen spamming finishers along with Delans, and of course Orochi Iori as the leader here. We've already talked about all these strikers ad nauseum at this point in the past, so we don't need to kind of get into those, but really this is the team that you're going to use if you're one of those people that likes to use your PC to play, or if you have your controller hooked up. You'll get the most out of this team because you're able to cycle through things so much quicker than a person on maybe a mobile phone could, and that's the way that you make this team run. And this is the team that I would recommend to you guys if you're in that position and have those benefits working to your advantage. Obviously, take full advantage of it. If you have the stuff laying around and you're already using it, you might as well. Of course, this is not anywhere near a budget team, and that is going to be kind of, you know, to the chagrin of many people, but it is what it is. This is just one of those things where I felt like with the fact that this team has performed so well over the past few months for people, since it has been discovered how well it does with those types of things working to its advantage, that I would be remiss if I did not at least bring it up and put it in here, because inevitably people in the comments would point it out. But overall, that is going to be kind of your veteran-friendly, budget-friendly, and then sort of hybrid team for more sort of veterans who are going to be using things like emulators and such. But overall, you can kind of interchange with the budget team, like I said, the different characters that are going to be extremely powerful in general for general PvE content and get some sort of success out of them. But this is just the best one in my opinion. Now, of course, you might disagree. There might be characters you prefer, maybe fit your playstyle better, but as far as all the people I've seen, all the different runs I've seen, people I've talked to and compared notes with, this is going to be kind of the best budget-friendly comp, and I know that's why most people are here. But let's go ahead and move on, and we're going to talk about cards. So with cards, kind of the rules remain the same from what we talked about yesterday. Not a whole lot different goes into this as far as set cards and things. However, what I will say is, for Iori here, you definitely want to use this new option card. That is going to be a must for this, in my opinion, if you want to get the full extent of his power out of him. Some people like to use this card for the extra darkness damage dealt. It's a 25% boost. If your characters are built up enough, though, I feel like it's a wasted slot. I feel like you'd be better off using a cooldown reduction card or something of that nature. However, if you're somebody that feels like you need the extra help, you might find it beneficial. Figure it's worth pointing out. Set card-wise, that's going to come down to the usual kind of tier list, quote-unquote, of Leah and Tekken being at the top. And then from there, you can kind of start talking about your Akanes and sort of your different Fest sets from there. But really the best two for this are going to be the Leah and the Tekken set overall. And then outside of that, for option cards, your best cooldown reduction cards, whatever cards you prefer, you can go with that. Finisher-wise, you always want to use kind of the best possible finishers if available. 3 PGs can be really nice, depending. Some people might prefer the original Orochi Iori card, but that's not something I'd choose. This is a good budget set for people who don't have any Fest sets whatsoever. But that is like talking super budget, and at that point, you're definitely probably not going to be clearing the bar that you need with just 1 or 2 keys. That's just not going to happen with that kind of set. You're going to need these cards in order to make that happen. But like I said, with the finishers, really it comes down to preference, but I prefer the 3PG for Iori. That tends to be the one that is going to be the most talked about for all these characters. The rest are pretty much self-explanatory, although I guess there is a case to be made yet again with Gonits, but I prefer the 3PG for this. I don't think you necessarily need the 5PG, especially if you're using him. You're needing to fire off finishers as much as possible anyway, so the 3PG, in my opinion, is just going to outperform the 5PG in these scenarios for the most part. So overall, that's kind of the explanation on cards. I don't feel like cards or anything, again, we need to get too thick into the weeds with, because cards, yet again, are just kind of up to what you have available to you. If you're ever wondering, just generically, again, kind of rule of thumb is Leah and Tekken, and then Akane from there, and then so on and so forth. But overall, guys, hopefully that is beneficial to you. Hopefully that at least gives you some information to help you out. The next thing we're going to do is jump into a run, and I'm just going to point out some little idiosyncrasies with this boss that might differ from the previous one that you'll want to pay attention to that'll help your runs. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Now, this fight with Omega Rugal tends to run pretty much the same as the hard mode, although he's a little bit more aggressive here and does more damage, obviously. But overall, the kind of general rules of thumb remain the same, in my opinion, as far as what you're going to want to look out for and do when you're going against him. Now, there's a couple of little things that I can point out to you guys, and I'm going to try and show you here. Now, I couldn't slow-mo some of this stuff that I wanted to show you because it just doesn't work, but basically I'm going to point it out. It's going to come up here soon, where you're going to notice a bit of a frame rate drop and a hiccup, and that is going to be something to look out for that actually gives you a lot of information. But overall, things to keep in mind. Basically, when he comes out of his stun, he's going to do one of two things. He's either going to probably Psycho Cutter you, or he is going to use his stun and his nuke. Keep that in mind. Now, I believe it might be right here. No, it's not right here, but I'll show you guys. It's coming up here very soon. It's in this part of the video that I want to show this to you. But basically, what you're going to notice with this version of Rugal, and actually with the hard mode version as well, something to keep in mind, is the fact that whenever you do your finisher and his shield is up, you're going to notice a frame rate dip with your animation during your finisher that'll tip you off to the fact that he has his shield down. Now, when that happens, and it's going to happen right here, you're going to see it, and I'm going to try and point it out. Again, I couldn't slow-mo this for you guys. Right there. So you saw that very brief frame rate drop. That is a signal that he no longer has his shield up. So if you can't see him and you are wondering, and that does come into play, like for instance, if you're wondering, okay, do I swap into my Omega Rugal or whoever my shield down nuke is, that'll tip you off to that. Now, kind of getting back to as far as other things to look at with him, again, when he is coming out of his stun and putting his shield back up, he's probably going to try and stun you, or he is probably going to try and Psycho Cutter you. So keep that in mind. Now, sometimes he'll get lucky and he won't do either of those things, but most times he will. With this finisher for Delins, for instance, by the way, a lot of people have issues with him missing it because Omega Rugal likes to backpedal and walk out of damage range. If you want to alleviate that, something I highly suggest doing is going ahead and just dodging to the middle of the screen and then proccing it then, because at that point he can't get out of range of it. Now, he doesn't always back up out of it. Sometimes he'll just walk right into it or just keep trying to combo into you, and it's kind of funny. But do try to time it that way so that you're in the middle of the screen. That way you do make sure that you optimize hitting him with that. And that is the finisher I would primarily try to focus on if you're using Delins, because that one is the one that applies darkness. And so I like to use that one when the shield is about ready to go down, or come back up rather. And then I will try to go ahead and hit that. That way the initial couple hits at least apply the darkness, even if he does try to stun me out of the animation. That way I at least get that dot on him, and I can go ahead and from there lay into him. Now, other things to keep in mind is whenever you swap into a character and his shield is up and he's still active, you may want to just try and automatically dodge the second you jump in, because typically if he's flat-footed when you swap in and he's not in the middle of an animation, he is going to try and combo you immediately. So if you want to try to avoid getting your run ruined by a combo, you can do that. Dodging is your best friend in these runs, and you're going to want to try to time those as best as humanly possible, no matter what characters you're using in general. Make sure that you're using your strikers as best you can. Now, you may forget here and there, but try not to. If you want to make sure that you drop in, for instance, a character that is going to put up tons of damage when the shield is up, after you've applied darkness with one of your darkness dealers, just so that you can drop that shield just that much quicker, or those characters that have your darkness on them are on cooldown, or they're just a striker that you're using with a character that doesn't have darkness in general, you can do that. For instance, if you have your Iori out and you have your Lady Geese, you use the Lady Geese, and then you want to swap into Omega Rugal to take full advantage of the amount of damage that he's able to output with the darkness up, so that you can drop that shield just that much quicker. Again, you see the frame rate drop there. You can actually see him with his shield down in this version here, but you did see the frame rate drop there yet again. It does it every single time you break the shield with your animation going on. So keeping that in mind, pay attention to that, guys. But yeah, so there's several different things to look out for, and those are just some of them. Overall, the exploit of being able to smash your finisher right as he's about to stun you does remain in the expert difficulty as well, and can help you out quite a bit if you're somebody who doesn't have your characters built up as much as mine, so therefore yours are a little bit more squishy. That'll come in handy. Again, it's not foolproof. It takes some split-second timing, but if you know that when his shield goes back up after he comes out of his stun that he is going to probably be using that, then you can time it pretty well. But overall, guys, that is pretty much the video. Like I said, there are other characters that are usable here, just not ideal in my opinion. I try to only stick with characters I feel like are at least close to ideal or going to give you the most kind of bang for your buck. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have characters you enjoy using, leave them in the comments section so other people can take full advantage of those if they weren't covered here. Like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I appreciate all of you guys. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.